Healthcare and senior care is fraught with problems and challenges, but we're also seeing some amazing new clinical treatments and resources. This show will help illuminate and uncover the good, bad, the ugly in order to equip patients, families, and other healthcare providers. Welcome to Senior Care Confidential.
Hey, Joe.
Hello, Brian.
I feel like it's been weeks.
I know.
Since we've seen each other. You were in France for a little bit, and then Ohio, and I was in Spain.
I know.
And we're
nice?
finally reconnected.
We're nice and refreshed, ready to take on fall in the winter.
Speaking of fall, we felt like today would be a really good time to start talking about some frailty stuff, especially as we get like later into the years. We got family members coming over for Thanksgivings and Christmases and that kind of stuff. And so I know we're technically still in the summertime, but we're getting close to like the Medicare Advantage stuff is coming up, the open enrollment. So it gets you just start thinking towards the end of the year, what are some things that we need to be paying attention to? And so we talk a lot, I know my company does, and you guys do too. We talk a lot about frailty with seniors. And, in some of the classes I teach at some of these senior living communities, we talk about it a lot. In the hospitals I teach at, this seems to be like this prevailing thing, which kind of makes sense because we are dealing with older individuals. I think we talked before, like do you remember what the average lifespan was in the 1820s? It's like 200 years ago.
No, what was it?
It's 38.
What?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
30. Now, I will be honest. It doesn't mean that there weren't people living into their 70s and 80s, but we didn't have penicillin, right? There were infant deaths and, that kind of stuff. So there was a lot, the medical technology was not there like we have now. And so, yeah, average age was 38. And then in the 1920s, it grew to 54. So 38 to 54. And now if you take away like the COVID years, it's like 80, 78 to 80, depending if you're male or female. And so we are dealing with a much larger number of older individuals whose body parts are wearing down. The warranty's gone. And so we're having to figure out how do we help them navigate and maintain this higher quality of life. And so I was talking with some folks a couple weeks ago before I went to Spain was so awesome. Before I went to Spain, my brain's still there. I was talking to some folks before we left to go to country, and this frailty thing kept coming up. And so I was looking up some stats on it, and it's pretty phenomenal. My impression has always been that we are waiting sometimes too long to get interventions in place. And I know you see it too.
And that's a question that we have as care managers. That's one of the first questions. Have you had any falls? Oh, yeah, mom has. And they don't see there's an issue.
Right. Yeah. And a lot of times it's, and we'll go through some of these frailty kind of indexes in a second, but it's like it's a multifaceted thing. And it's like, if I say she's frail, you get like a picture in your mind of kind of what a frail person looks like. And we try to figure out some like objective ways to quantify that quality of a picture of that female that you get in your mind. And it's funny because there's just all these different types of frailty scores or frailty indexes. And so one of our big things for us is we work with a lot of people who have that fall, who have the injury, who have the medical complication. They go to the hospital, they go to the rehab, and then they come back and see us. And my big push has always been, all right, awesome. I'm glad we get to work with you then, because we're going to solve all these other things for future issues while I have you. But I would love to get a hold of these, not a hold, but you know what I'm saying, to be able to help and intervene with some of these family members and seniors earlier, because you see it too. You have Mrs. Smith, who's 82 years old, functioning okay, starting to slow down a little bit, maybe not getting out as much as she used to, not playing the card games like she used to. So you're starting to see there's a few of these variables you're seeing change. And then she has that fall or that bronchitis that leads to pneumonia that sends her to the hospital. And then when she comes back, she's like 30% down from where she was. And because now we're at a risk, a higher risk factor down here, now we're at risk for something else happening. And then the next time something happens, they come down here. And the challenge with us is sometimes we can't get them back to their previous level of function because they're in older bodies that just don't respond as fast. Now, in large cases, we can, but there's still times where that baseline just continuously drops. Even though we bump them back up again, they don't get all the way back up there. And so my feeling is, and this bears out in some of the data too, is if you can thwart some of the incidences that happen and the consequences that happen from those falls, injuries, hospitalizations, then we can avoid some of this precipitous baseline drops that we see. We deal with a lot of, you do too, senior living communities where they see it all the time. At some point that next ER visit is the last one that they'll have, and they can't come back to the facility anymore because now they need a lot more care. So anyway, so I was pulling some stats and I sent them to you earlier today, but they're saying that 25% of seniors, so those 65 and older, are considered frail or pre-frail.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
Yeah, and so 1 out of 4 are considered frail or pre-frail, and also interestingly enough, coincides with 1 out of 4 seniors fall every year too. So there's probably some overlap to that stat. But what they do find is if you are considered frail, you are 5 times more likely to become disabled, and 4 times more likely to end up in a nursing home. And so we don't really want this frail thing to creep up on us, because we already know what the outcomes of those things are going to be, is that an outcome you probably don't want. I did a post on LinkedIn a couple of days ago, was talking about the National Council on Aging does all these surveys. And one of the ones that they put out I think it was last year, and it makes sense because you and I both feel the same way. 88% of seniors want to age in place, meaning they want to stay in their own home.
Correct.
Well, the number one way to stay in your home is to avoid becoming frail. Because we already know what the outcomes of those kind of things are. And so I thought we would go through what things are we looking for as healthcare practitioners? Like, what are the things that we can help patients or their family members kind of identify, hey, if you see these couple things or these few things, these are probably the biggest predictors. I will tell you, there are, like, the Edmonton is probably my favorite one. I think there's 9 or 10 things to look at. It's probably a lengthier test than you want to give. It doesn't take that long, but if you're looking for like a quick hit, we'll go through kind of what a few of those things are. And so what I thought we would do is go through a couple of these. They did and just to kind of set the stage here too, there was a study that was done out of the British Medical Journal. I'm going to read it just because I don't want to misquote it. But they've always noticed that there is a link between physical decline, like functional decline, and death. Like, we see that. If you start to see physical decline, death and mortality are going to be
on the way.
You got it. Yes. So we're trying to figure out, okay, what does that really look like? And so they looked at 2 different, in this study, it was 6,200 participants. And the first part of the study, they looked for any death for any reason that occurred within this 10-year timeframe. Okay. And so what they found was, and if you were looking for things to pay attention to, those that died tended to have 3 things. One, they had worse physical function measures. So what I mean by that is transfers on and off a couch, on and off the toilet, dressing, bathing, right? Think of functional things that we have to do in a daily life, right? So they're worse in those. They have slower walking speeds. And so, in another study showed they also had reduced grip strength. And so slower walking speeds, weaker grip strength, and the inability to function kind of normally in their daily lives. Then the second part of the study, they looked at, okay, we want to trace the trajectories of this decline for physical function, like over these 10 years. And so what they found was that, and I'll quote this, survivors tended to have faster walking speed, right? So if we're contrasting those 2 things, faster walking speed, here's where the stronger grip is, stronger grip, and better ability to stand up from a chair. And the differences between the survivors and those who died were detected as many as several years before. So stated differently, They were already seeing slower walking speeds, less grip strength, and less ability to function in your daily life. And that was precipitating factors rather, for now you're going to start to see this faster trajectory towards mortality. So you're seeing these things several years before the actual death. And so, and then they say, in addition, during the years before death, the rate of physical decline increased. So you're already starting to see these trends, and then the trends get worse, and that's when you're starting to see, okay, we're getting close to the end of the runway here. And so these findings suggest that early detection and correction of declining physical function, including into middle age, so starting for me and you, starting now, may help lower the risk of death and quality of life.
Well, you talk about weights, you talk about protein intake, you talk about exercise, and, I had brought a patient to the doctor the other day. She had a great bill of health. Labs were perfect. It was a concierge doctor. And he was like, are you exercising?
Love it.
Are you lifting weights?
Love it.
And are you walking? Yes, I'm walking in the house. You need to walk outside of the house. They really are pushing exercise.
I love it. The challenge is that you have to know who to go to help you set up a safe
do it correctly
program.
It's like a trainer.
Yeah. And I'll tell you,
like a Medicare trainer.
Yes. So I was teaching at this fall prevention class today. It's this, lesson I teach this in a bunch of different communities. And they call it Wrinkle Ranch, which where it is, but I've never heard of it called that way. Anyway, we have this enormous class. This is like the second time. We're actually having to open up a third class now because we got like 50 participants.
That's
and every
awesome.
time I teach it, and this week 2 is where we talk about exercise, and I give them like the big levers to move. I said you can always optimize each one of these, but if we're just thinking like broad strokes of what's the most beneficial impactful things that you can do, here's the 3 of them, right? And so inevitably, a few people will ask you either during the class or afterwards, they'll ask you more details on like, well, specifically how many reps should I do and how much weight should I be doing? And so that's where you really do want to have.
Yeah, it's individualized.
Great. I love the fact that the doctor's promoting that. We've talked about this book before. It's a book by Dr. Gabriel Lyon called Forever Strong. And she says in her mind, the number one thing that you can do to improve quality of life and health span, not lifespan, although lifespan is probably associated with that too, is actually maintaining good muscle strength. And that's backed up in some of the research too. They do check girth, like thigh girth in terms of like muscle mass. And they do find as you start to atrophy in particularly your thigh muscles as we get older, there's a greater correlation to mortality and loss of function. And so lifting weights, doing some resistance training is a crucial component of that.
So I want to share, we had a client that flew her father from Massachusetts to Dallas. He was incontinent. He was wheelchair bound. He was overweight, transfer assist to go from the chair to the bed, and within 6 months he was walking.
Wow.
He was continent again. I mean, we put him on a bowel program. We walked him every day. We did exercises every day, but they were directed by a medical trainer.
Yep.
And he had physical therapy too.
Yep.
But the caregivers had direction, and that was so key.
Yes.
So you're right about that. But so frailty is reversible. Is this what you're saying?
It is. Well, to a certain extent, right? So when the researchers talk about frailty being manageable and reversible, I think the biggest key is how far down the frailty slope have we gone, right? Because the further down, the harder it is to get it back. And so that's why there's the big push on, especially starting in your middle ages, starting to focus on these key things, because that's where you can prevent it. We're not preventing death, but we can prevent the long, slow decline, physical function that leads to mortality. You can actually absolutely impact that. So I'd say probably manageable and improvable is probably better than reversible, but you can, in some cases, reverse some of that. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's amazing. So frailty is not just getting old. So let's talk about that.
Yeah.
So it's just inactivity, correct? A lot of it. Or you've been in the hospital. And
yeah, this is okay. I'm glad you mentioned this. So there's a really interesting study. Frailty, let's think of frailty as a quality of I'm not able to function the way that I normally am. And because of that, everything's gotten weaker, including your internal organs, your muscles. And so I'm at more risk for either exacerbations of chronic conditions or a new one. That's a really lengthy definition.
No, I get it.
But let's just say a weakened state globally is kind of and at higher risk for something bad to happen in the near future, right? So that's kind of our working definition of frailty. It does get manifested as some of these physical things, which is why my favorite frailty index is like this Edmonton, because it does include some of these physical factors, these functional factors. But there's an interesting study that came out. I'm going to pull that one up too. That came out a couple years ago, and This one was done out of Mass General and Harvard. And so it makes sense, but it's not what we think. And so what they did is they figured, their hypothesis was, we think that there's more to frailty than just these functional measures, which they're correct. So they actually filtered out the functional measures. They didn't look at them at all. Instead, what they did for 8,200 seniors, they wanted to look at social factors. And when I tell you the list of these things, your mouth's gonna be on the floor because it's wild. And so what they did is they found 183 social characteristics that they tested these 8,200 seniors on, and they found that it was about 8 to 10 of them that were like the true indicators of, okay, this person's frail. Here's what they looked at. And they were looking for increased risk of death within the next 4 years. Ready? Poor neighborhood cleanliness was number one.
So what is that?
What
does that even mean?
Yeah. Low perceived control over your financial situation. So I think in terms of
that's anxiety,
depression, those kind of things, right? Yeah. And we see, right? So like we've talked about fibromyalgia before. We see things where there's a physical component and a psychological component in a lot of chronic illnesses. And so I can see how like being stressed all the time is going to negatively impact your physical function. So poor neighborhood cleanliness, that was a shocker for me. The low perceived control over a financial situation, meeting with your children less than yearly, loneliness.
Yeah, well,
But they isolate. They didn't talk about like your neighbors. They talked about your kids.
Wow. Well,
really
family's so important.
Yeah. And then not volunteering. So not giving back, not doing something that feels useful, that you're being useful to other people or other dogs or whatever. Feeling isolated. And then the last one was being treated with less courtesy or respect. All social, psychological. Here's the fascinating part. If we skip down here, it says this model. Now, mind you, there's dozens of these. There's a fried frailty index, which I like. We can go with that one too. The Edmonton. A lot of these look at these functional things because I think a correct assumption is that if we're starting to fail on the inside, we will see that manifest on the outside and vice versa, right? There's a correlation between your physical prowess, your physical capabilities, and what's happening to like your internal organs, your lungs, your heart, all those kind of things. So those things kind of work in concert. Here's what's fascinating. So quoting, this model was even more accurate than two commonly used models that consider multiple chronic conditions and functional abilities. So looking at neighborhood cleanliness, isolation, did you visit with your kids in the last year, was more of had a stronger predictive ability than actually looking at the functional things that they're struggling with.
Wow.
Isn't that amazing?
Well, it's mind over matter.
Yeah. So, so they said, besides predicting the risk of death, because remember, this is over the 4 years, the new model is also good at determining who might become disabled or might need to reside in a nursing home. So it just adds more, in some ways, clarity that frailty is really a multifaceted thing, psychologically, mentally, cognitive, obviously physically, chronic conditions, all those kind of things. We just kind of see it manifested in some other things, but it's fascinating that those kind of social characteristics also impact that. I would think
someone that has a strong faith too. I know both my grandmothers had a very strong faith. Both volunteered. They were older than the shut-ins that they'd go visit. They'd call them shut-ins and cook for them and clean for them and visit them and just be friends to them, read the Bible to them. Both my grandmothers lived to be late 90s, almost 100, each of them. Yeah. So a lot of that it's, using your brain, using your gifts.
Yeah. I think there's
volunteering.
There's a case to be made where if you are still living a life where you're providing value outside of you, then it's almost like there's an incentive for the body to continue to remain strong. And in the absence of something useful to do, like we've all seen, we have family members who've experienced this, where the husband retires at 63 or 65 or 67 or 70, and in 2 years of golfing, gone. Why is that? because they were healthy before.
Because they're not using their brain. They're not using their...
I think there's something about, I have retired from life, and God says, okay, I'll take the parts back. I don't know if that's the way it works.
They don't have a purpose anymore.
Yeah. So there's something about having that purpose, which is fascinating. So like one of the things that we focus on is we always say, isolated, lonely, depressed seniors decline fast. And so one of our things is before we discharge, we're actually looking at, we need activities on your schedule, physical, mental, and social every week. And so that helps to solve some of this. Like, I need social stuff, So is that part of the care plan for physical therapy? It's part of our care plan for physical therapy.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, it's I started doing this before COVID, just because I'm kind of a feeler. I'm empathetic, so I kind of sense some things, and so I started working on, without ever putting like in the notes. It was just something I started doing on my own with my own patients, and it had such a huge impact because I also realized when you're starting to build out goals. One of the dangers of therapy goals or doctor goals or nursing goals is that they're our goals because we're the expert, and I get that, but there's something unique that changes with that relationship when you start asking, hey, so what are we trying to get? What are the things you really love to do that you miss out on doing like the last few weeks since you've been in the hospital, whatever? When they see that you're relating your therapy interventions or whatever to their personal goals. So we've done things where we've gotten people back to dancing. Like, I've made dancing part of our treatment regimen with their husband and wife. Like, it was awesome. We had tears. Like, it was awesome. So we do things. We've helped people getting out to football games, like high school football games. That was like their goal. So we set what's the process for getting to that point where we can safely do these kind of things. And it does change. It changes things for compliance too. But it's also impactful for them because now it's things that they really miss doing that gives them that zeal for life again and things to look forward to.
Absolutely. Well, I think about, there's a woman in our choir. I've sung in the same choir for about 11 years, and she would sing up at the top and just made a joyful noise, never missed a Sunday, never missed a Wednesday. Well, then she's aged. Yeah. She came down a little lower in the choir. Yeah. Now she's on the first row, but just in the last 6 months, now she has a walker too, but she shows up.
Yep.
And she has something to look forward to. And I know that has been what has kept her going. And I feel bad for her. I know doesn't feel well. Yep. She's overweight.
She's maintained that good quality of life for her. And she really enjoys doing that.
Absolutely.
And if you take that away, so she ends up in the hospital and she ends up even more frail, and you take that away, you can imagine what that will do for her. Like, she's been singing for decades. Mm-hmm. Right. That's a huge thing for her to continue to maintain.
Well, as far as loneliness, and I think about, we are so fortunate in Texas. We have some amazing senior centers.
Yeah, we do.
And it is so inexpensive, maybe $5 a month. I know the McKinney is $5 or $10 a month. And like you say, start that frailty thinking early. 50 and above can go for $5 or $10 a month. It's cheaper than going to a health club. Yep. And there are activities and friendships and groups, walking groups, travel groups. You can use your mind, learn Spanish or learn how to sew. There's so many things you can do. And,
that's right.
As I get older, I think about all the things, wow, I wish I'd learned this, or I wish I had done that. And I feel as I get older, there's just not enough time in the day to get everything done that I want to do. I don't know if you feel that way, but
every day.
I know I do. I just
every day.
So it's so important to have something to look forward to. And it's so important to learn, to always want to learn and grow and use your mind.
Yep.
I have a family member that was so terrified of shots. And she had the COVID vaccine, and she was sore, hadn't had a shot, flu shot, anything in years. Well, she started her shoulder hurt where she had the shot, and she wound up, now her hand is completely contracted. Ooh. It was mind over matter. She was convinced that shot did something to her arm. It is completely contracted. She is maybe 72. But that was her brain thinking, I'm doomed.
It's amazing what the brain can do on the positive side and on the negative side.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. So I think, for these people, like you're talking about frailty, if you've got somebody listening that maybe they do feel frail, mm-hmm. they've had to go through, a couple bouts of pneumonia over the year and they're just not as strong. How can they talk to their doctor about getting some therapy through Medicare?
Well, let's go a little broader. I'm a big fan of preventative care. Ideally, they're having conversations with the doctor before they're considered homebound. And so they can actually go out to outpatient therapy, get out and do those kind of things. But if we're talking about to a point where they've come to a point where it's really unsafe or just really taxing to leave the house, that's a really easy conversation with your doctor. Hey, listen, things are getting tougher. Would really like to have some in-home physical therapy. Doctor read orders. It's really fast and easy. But I would also like to talk about the actual things to look out for. So we talked about gait speed. That's kind of hard to measure. I know your son has literally a gait speed being walking speed radar in his office at his clinic in Cleveland. So if you make it into Cleveland, I'm sure he'll see you and you can check your gait speed. Otherwise, for those of us, they will typically look at it's a cone to cone timed walk, which again, it's a pain in the butt to do it that way. But just to give some context of that, for every 0.1, so 0.1, every 0.1 meter per second less in speed is equivalent to 10 to 12% increase in a new chronic condition. So it doesn't take much of a slowdown to start seeing those chronic conditions start to creep up again or exacerbate. And so gait speed is a really big one. I actually pulled up here. This is the fried frailty phenotype, and they do segment it by height, but we'll just kind of split down the middle. And they do also do it by males and females. And this is gait speed walking 15 feet. So if you have a corridor or if you got a dining room in your house, you want to time yourself. I think you can actually do it on your Apple Watches too. But if you don't have that and you just want to time yourself of going 15 feet, mark out 15 feet. And if you can do it in roughly 7 seconds, again, give or take, depending on if you're male, female, how tall you are, that is a good indicator that you are not frail. If it's taking you longer than 6 or 7 seconds to walk across your 15-foot dining room, there's probably something brewing.
Okay, so I'm going to go back. So say my little client talks to her doctor, but she's not homebound. Yep. She's, she is slowing down, but she's not homebound. Yep. So she wouldn't qualify through Medicare for...
Perhaps not. She may be able to go to outpatient therapy.
Okay.
Which is fine. So she can still get some therapy outside the home. But home health is designed specifically for those that it's either too difficult or unsafe.
So outpatient therapy, the doctor still needs to write an order.
Needs to write an order. Yeah.
And then how does the patient qualify for outpatient therapy?
That's that's even easier because there's no homebound requirement for that. The doctor writes an order for, if it's because of frailty, there's usually some other underlying things that are causing it. Frailty is kind of like the overall look of the patient, if you will. It's not really a qualifying diagnosis, but there's probably rheumatoid or osteoarthritis or, some heart disease or something that's causing this decline or deconditioning or higher risk of falls. So they just need to write the order and send it over to a PT.
That is great. Yep. That's great. I highly recommend that.
I'm a big fan. I think you're going to see, and I follow a bunch of people on LinkedIn that are kind of in this proactive aging model. We kind of all run in similar circles and we talk. But I think there's a growing trend. It looks to be, at least in the circles that I'm in, where PT is actually going to become one of the if you will, wellness checks that become annual, because we are the movement specialists. And so there's all these other things that we know to go look for. Plus we're the ones who can, exercise a proper, prescription plan for you. So I think you're going to start seeing that as part of the annual wellness thing it's
a wellness check.
Cause they are starting to realize, the functional mobility and gait speed and the ability to get in and out of chairs and manage things around the house, those things are really looked at very well by PTs who understand how the body moves. And so I think you'll see that in the future that PTs will be part of that. And you just get an annual wellness exam from your PT, who can also prescribe some, maybe with his home program or whatever. But we're not there yet. But I think you'll start seeing that more.
That's great.
Yeah. So I would say, in terms of things to look out for, obviously gait speed. Mom and dad are slowing down. That's a big indicator. If mom or dad are having a hard time getting in and out of chairs. So I share this in my class all the time. There's a test called the 5 times sit to stand test. So it is what it says it is. So we measure somebody's speed of going from sitting to standing 5 times with their arms across their chest. You can't push up with the arms, like you can't use the armrest. For our age demographic that we work with, so roughly 80, they need to be able to do that in about 15 seconds.
Wow.
Which feels fast. It's not fast. For me and you, it's very slow. But it will feel fast to somebody who struggles. If you can get to that 15, statistically speaking, or under 15, statistically speaking, you have a far less chance for falls because of what it involves with strength, power, stability, neuromuscular control, all these other factors that go into just being able to do that. And so that's another one. So if mom or dad are having a hard time transferring, you can look at grip strength. Grip strength is a little bit of a misnomer because if you're noticing that grip strength is getting weaker, you can't just sit in your chair and squeeze on a ball and force your forearms and your hands to get stronger, because that's not what is implied. The reason why grip strength is actually getting weaker is because you're not getting up and doing enough stuff. You're not folding laundry, you're not pulling weeds, you're not doing whatever it is that you do. Those kind of normal functional activities are not being done. And so because you're not using your hands anymore, that's why they get weaker.
Wow.
So grip strength is another one. But those are like the big ones. I would look for transfers for gait stability or gait speed. And I would look at, grip strength. If mom and dad are having a hard time opening easy to open jars, sometimes it's arthritic. But if you start to notice that kind of stuff, I would say that's probably an indicator that you should intervene earlier. It doesn't mean like you're worried about them falling today. It just means, hey, I'm starting to notice a few things. Why don't we get you around a PT to kind of get you move in the right direction?
I love that.
Yeah.
That's great information. Thank you.
Yeah. So on this frailty thing, the other thing we look at too is weight loss. And I do know doctors check for this. I know we ask for it. If there's any unexplained weight loss, particularly like 10 pounds or more in like the last 6 to 12 months, if you're trying to, it's different. But if it's unintentional, there's usually something else going on. It could be an appetite issue. It could just be, we're just not paying attention to caloric intake. And so those are things that to look out for as well. And
wow.
Do you live in a clean neighborhood? and your kids,
maybe it just means they don't want to go outside if they're not in a clean neighborhood. Or
I don't know. I think there's a whole vibe around that. Like if I live in a trashier area, I don't see my family. I don't get out and socialize. I'm not out volunteering. I don't feel like I'm in control of my finances. That would feel heavy, like cloudy, heavy to me. And that would not feel like a good existence. And so there's probably those independent variables are probably not the thing. Like it's not because you live on a dirty street and the trash man hasn't come by in a few weeks. It's not because of that. I think it's because when you add all those other things into it, it just feels like discouraging, a miserable environment. Yeah. I guess is probably the best way. And that misery is what contributes to, decline functionally, physically, internally. So,
takeaway is
get started early.
Get some exercise. So let me ask you this, like for somebody that's over 65 and wants to go out and buy weights, they're not appropriate for home care or home health or really don't need to see the doctor. They're fine. What would you recommend, Brian?
I'm glad you asked. I would definitely consult an expert. Here's why. And so my back is killing me today because I'm guilty of doing the same thing because I think I'm younger than I really am. If you do not know what you're doing, the risk of injury will set you back further than the potential gains that you might get if you just try to go this and not know what you're doing. So, for example, I did legs the other night. I had back surgery a couple years ago, and I'm still trying to strengthen all of that back up again. And so I had a lot of weight on a squat machine, a hack squat machine that loaded my spine, and I'm paying for it 2 days later. So that 2 days, now I'm 47, that 2 days might turn into 3 or 4, where now I can't go lift at all. For an older body, that could be 3 or 4 weeks or 3 or 4 months.
But can't you?
Because you injured something. And so that's why I say the danger of, if you don't know what you're doing, if you're somebody who's trained before, you just start light. Don't go crazy with this. There's there's online things you can go follow too. You don't necessarily have to have somebody there with you. I still think it's always better if you have somebody who's live with you, especially with an older body. There's things that we can pick up on.
Especially at the beginning. I mean, you can do the online stuff, and there are a lot of good ones.
Just go for a few weeks, have somebody set you up a program to follow. But make sure that they're looking at your form's on point, because joints are wearing out as we get older. It is the reality. And so if your form's not on point, you actually may be putting yourself in
injuring yourself.
Yes.
Correct.
And then you have the injury thing that takes you out of exercising for the next several weeks, because now you're recovering. And that's where that big danger is. So I'd say the number one thing is, don't go buy weights. Unless you've trained before and know what you're doing, go seek a professional, get a PT or get a personal trainer who's actually worked with geriatric patients before, and let them kind of guide you through those first few weeks, give you a good program. As a general rule for exercise, highly recommend what we call zone 1 or zone 2 exercise, which is 20 to 30 minutes of some sort of walking or light bike riding where you can still sing or hold a conversation. That's that level. Great. And then 3 or 4 times a week of some sort of resistance training. I think those are like the biggest movers, I think, because you need muscle stimulus to combat age-related muscle loss, known as sarcopenia, that starts in your 30s, escalates as we get older. Your body needs a stimulus to maintain that muscle strength, so you have to do resistance training. It's non-negotiable. And I like the zone 2, 1 and 2 walking, just because it does help with overall energy expenditure, energy growth, because it impacts your mitochondria. So you will feel like you have more energy if you do those things. Those are like the 2 big things. But like you mentioned, I still would consult a professional if you've not trained before, at least on the resistance training part.
I love that. Brian, this has been great. Yep. Thank you so much for all this information. Yep. Be sure to consult with a professional.
Yes.
But let's get that exercise going.
That's right.
All right. Thanks so much. Have a good day.
You too. Bye.